A single golden leaf fluttered down from the oak tree in front of the small ivy-covered building. The shop's facade, with its wooden sign that read Archer's Antiques, exuded a quiet dignity. Late afternoon sunlight caught on the gleaming windows and cast long shadows along the cobblestone walkway. Cassandra Weaver, a graduate student at the local university, looked down at the broken watch in her hand. It was a relic passed down from her grandfather, and it had finally stopped ticking a few weeks earlier. For Cassandra, the watch was more than a timekeeper. It was a tangible link to the stories her grandfather once told about his youthful escapades. Everything from dancing under moonlight to forging friendships that lasted decades. She ran her thumb lightly over the cracked glass, determined to see if there was any hope of restoring it. Stepping inside, she heard the delicate tinkle of a bell on the doorframe, before taking in the scent of worn leather bindings, polished wood, and oiled metal. Glass cabinets displayed pocket watches, antique mantel clocks, and a miscellany of jewelry of eras gone by. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, marking each step as a venture into both artistry and history. Leaning over a high counter strewn with watchmaking tools was a man with a magnifying loupe perched on his eye. Silvery hair brushed his temples, though he hardly seemed old. He had the calm presence of someone who was used to coaxing broken parts back into harmony. When he turned, his warm brown eyes met hers, prompting an unexpected stirring inside her chest. "Welcome," he said gently, removing the loupe and setting it on the worn wooden countertop. "Can I help you?" He gave her a polite smile as his gaze fell to the watch in her hand. She nodded and took a few steps closer, carefully placing the heirloom on the counter. "I hope so. This belonged to my grandfather. It's been in my family for generations, and I guess time finally caught up with it." She laughed a little at her own pun, but felt a pang of regret that she hadn't taken more care to have it serviced earlier. "It stopped ticking last month. I've tried every shop in town, and they all said it was beyond repair." The man lifted the watch with an expert's delicate touch. He opened the back carefully and examined the intricate gears that no longer moved. "I'm Archer," he introduced himself, "and I believe nothing is ever truly beyond repair, but it might require a special approach, especially for a piece with sentimental value." Cassandra felt an air of new hope fill her. "Well, that's reassuring to hear. I'm Cassandra. I'm doing my master's in literature at the university." She slipped off her coat and hung it on a nearby stand. Her eyes wandered across the rows of gleaming timepieces. "I'm not exactly sure how old the watch is, but I wrote a research paper on the pocket watch's significance to my family. It's dear to me." Archer smiled, nodding as he picked up a slender screwdriver. "Let's see what we have here," he said softly. "We can talk as I open it up." Without further ado, he set to work, disassembling parts under a small lamp. Each gear was handled with gentle care, and Cassandra found it mesmerizing to watch. There was a careful precision in each of Archer's movements, like a choreographed dance. She had never witnessed that kind of open devotion to an object before, and it struck her as both comforting and slightly enchanting. She listened as he explained the significance of various gears and pivots, how all the pieces came together to create the measure of time. There was a kind of poetry in the way he spoke about watchmaking, reminding her of the way she felt when immersed in a good book. Every sentence he offered was laced with passion, and her heart beat a little faster, curious and enthralled. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, he had reassembled part of the watch and provided her a sense of hope that the watch might tick again someday. Over the next few days, Cassandra found reasons to stop by the shop. She would bring freshly brewed tea or a new pastry from the bakery around the corner. Archer always welcomed her with a warm smile, and they'd pass hours talking while he worked. They discovered that they had both grown up in families who treasured simple but meaningful traditions. Archer shared how his father, also a watchmaker, had taught him the trade when he was just a boy. He recounted winter nights spent at a rickety wooden table, illuminated only by a single lamp, learning to fit pocket watch parts together under his father's patient guidance. Cassandra, in turn, spoke of her grandfather's enthusiasm for old stories. The times he pointed to the watch's dial and said, "Time might move on, but our memories never have to." She recalled him telling tales of dancing with her grandmother in a grand ballroom, the ticking of that watch marking the steps of their waltz. Yet her grandmother had passed away years ago, and her grandfather was gone now too. The watch was the sole reminder of the hours and minutes they had once shared. Each memory that bubbled up as she recounted these stories made her both proud and sorrowful. During one of her visits, Cassandra noticed that the shop remained largely silent and empty. Few customers arrived, and she began to wonder how Archer sustained his craft in an era where digital technology overshadowed the charms of analog timepieces. Archer didn't seem particularly worried, though. He took quiet joy in every watch he repaired, treating them as though each was an irreplaceable treasure. When there was no conversation, he often hummed an old melody, a tune that Cassandra couldn't place, yet found soothing. It seemed to fill the corners of the room, weaving between tall shelves and dusty volumes of horological journals. One evening, after the sun had long set and golden lamplight glowed in the shop, Cassandra brought him a thermos of tea. She spotted him hunched over her grandfather's watch once again, magnifier in place, so focused that he failed to sense her arrival. Stepping closer, she placed the tea on the countertop and gently rested a hand on the edge of his workbench. "Archer," she whispered, not wanting to startle him. He blinked and looked up, removing the loupe. "Ah, I lose track of time," he said with a soft chuckle. His voice carried the exhaustion of extended hours spent hunched over minuscule parts. "Thank you for the tea. You're far too kind." He sipped gratefully before turning his attention back to the watch. "I've discovered something interesting," he said. "This watch is older than it first appeared. Its internal design resembles certain 18th century Swiss movements, which are quite rare. That would explain some of the difficulties I've had finding replacement parts." Cassandra let out a low whistle. 18th century? I never knew it was that old. That's remarkable. My grandpa used to talk about how his grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, brought it from Europe. But I never imagined it carried so much history. Archer nodded, tapping a gloved finger gently on the watch's surface. "If I can locate or craft the missing pieces, we can restore it precisely. But it's not just mechanical skill at play here. Each watch carries with it an essence of its past. I like to think that if we treat it with respect, the stories it once told find a way to live on." She turned her face toward him, and for the first time in a long while, felt that strange flutter in her chest once more. It wasn't just about the watch anymore. Over the days they had spent together, she realized she found solace in Archer's presence, a quiet resonance that made her feel understood. He might have been older than her by a handful of years, but there was an unmistakable warmth in the way he spoke, in the way he listened attentively, and in the way his eyes lit up whenever they shared a moment of connection. She asked, "Do you think you can fix it?" The question lingered in the still air, but she realized it wasn't just about the watch, it was about something intangible, a possibility for renewed hope in her life. He took her hand softly and turned her palm upward, placing the watch gently into her grasp. His hand lingered, wrapping her fingers around the heirloom. "I do," he said, and in that moment, Cassandra felt more trust in him than she'd felt in anyone for a long time. Weeks passed like the silent ticking of a steady clock. Amid her studies, Cassandra found time to visit Archer's workshop almost every other day. In those moments, she would lose herself in conversations about art, literature, and the subtle art of watchmaking. Archer revealed that he often used forging techniques from a distant era to handcraft gears that were no longer produced. He demonstrated how even the smallest imperfection could throw an entire mechanism out of sync. Each time, Cassandra learned more about dedication, about craftsmanship, about patience. She began to realize that patience was not just for watchmaking. It applied to life itself. Sometimes you had to wait, trust, and carefully put the pieces back together to keep going forward. She was nearing the end of her master's program, burdened by deadlines, but the time spent in Archer's shop proved to be an oasis from the pressures. Together, they made an unlikely pair, a craftsman who defied technology's rush, and a young scholar brimming with modern theories, but drawn to the past's mysteries. Sometimes she would watch the sun slipping through the stained glass window, painting the wooden floorboards in purple and gold mosaics. Archer would let her test the replaced parts by winding the watch, encouraging her to sense the tension in the mainspring. He guided her in cleaning the watch's face, removing years of grime that dulled its sheen. And with every passing experience, something else, equally delicate but undeniably real, took shape between them. Late in the autumn, a storm raged across town. Strong winds dashed leaves against the shop windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Cassandra, huddled in a thick cardigan, still ventured out to the shop, a bit surprised to see the light shining within the old building. When she pushed open the door, she found Archer waiting behind the counter, carefully packaging a grandfather clock for a rare client. "You're as persistent as this old clock," he teased with a grin. "I'm glad you made it safely." Water dripped from her coat, and she shivered slightly from the cold. Archer quickly grabbed a towel from the back room, offering it to her as though it were the most natural thing to do. His eyes flickered with concern, and Cassandra felt a warmth spreading through her, despite the October chill. She held on to the watch in her pocket like a talisman, feeling its weight and the promise that soon it might tick once again. A sudden rip of thunder shook the windows and the shop went dark. The overhead lights flickered off, leaving only the faint glow from Archer's work lamp. Cass gasped in surprise, but quickly steadied herself. Archer rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a small lantern, lighting it deftly with a match. Within seconds, the workshop was illuminated by a gentle flame that cast dancing shapes on the walls. "Power outage, I presume," he said calmly. "We might be stuck here for a bit, but I have some candles, too." In the dim glow, Cassandra thought he looked timeless, like an artisan from a bygone era, the flickering flame reflecting off his patient eyes. She smiled softly. "Well, at least we can keep each other company. Maybe you can finish telling me that story about your father's first watch?" He nodded, leading her to a small sitting area, where two aged wooden chairs faced a table. Around them stood dusty shelves crammed with watch parts, tools, and old journals. In that cozy semi-darkness, he explained how his father crafted his very first piece from melted down scraps, forging a rudimentary watch that ticked unevenly, but ticked nonetheless. The story gave Cassandra images of a young boy's delight, the smell of molten metal, and the knowledge that passion is what truly fueled creation. She found herself enthralled, leaning closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm as another crash of thunder shook the windows. When he finished, they sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain pounding against the building. Then Archer looked at her, the flame of the lantern reflecting in his eyes. "I've never shared that memory with anyone," he admitted. "Not in full detail. It's special to me." She squeezed his arm gently. "I'm honored to hear it," she whispered, feeling a gentle surge of affection building within her. "I have a confession too," she continued. "Beyond needing this watch fixed, I've come here because I feel calmer when I'm around you. And I feel seen, understood, even." Archer's gaze intensified, and the tension of unspoken feelings hovered between them. "I know what you mean," he said, voice hushed. "We're connected by something beyond just the watch. Some people don't believe in fate, but I like to think that certain broken things lead people to each other for a reason." Their hands met under the lantern's glow. For a brief moment, it felt as though time itself had paused, as if the watch they were working on had quietly enforced its own temporary ceasefire on the world. Outside, the storm continued raging, but inside Archer's antiques, a comforting stillness cocooned them. They were no longer alone in the swirling chaos of life. The following week, Cassandra's academic world ramped up. Thesis drafts, seminars, and presentations demanded most of her daylight hours. She doubted she would have more than a few minutes to check in with Archer. Each time she tried to slip away to his store, something else came up. Exhaustion took hold, and she felt the pressure mounting. That precious watch, so close to being fixed, weighed heavily in her thoughts. Would Archer think she had lost interest? But one evening, near the end of the semester, as the last of her library work concluded, Cassandra hurried to the shop with fluttering anticipation. The winter chill had settled, and her breath fogged up in front of her. Dusk had already descended by the time she reached the door. To her surprise, the shop's lights were on, and through the window she spotted Archer. He was standing at the counter with a smile, almost as though he was waiting for her. Inside, the smell of warm tea and cinnamon greeted her, and she realized he had anticipated her arrival somehow. Her heart pounded. It felt right to be back. "I've been making progress," Archer said in a hushed tone, gesturing for her to come closer. "I believe you'll be happy to see this." Nestled on a soft cloth lay her grandfather's watch, its face carefully polished. The glass had been replaced, and the intricate details of the dial shimmered under the lamp. Archer gently wound the crown, allowing the mechanism to build tension. Cassandra held her breath, and then, in the silence, she heard it, a steady, delicate tick. "Oh my God," she whispered, a delighted quiver in her voice. She placed a hand over her mouth as tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. "It's working. It's actually working." Archer smiled, carefully handing it to her. "Do you hear it? It's steady. It might even be more accurate than before, though it's best to keep it wound regularly. Old mechanisms like this need constant care. But I have faith you'll care for it diligently." She nodded, tears glistening as she lovingly cradled the pocket watch. Hearing the gentle tick was like reconnecting with ghosts of the past, her grandparents, their stories, their laughter. It was as though the watch had awakened, carrying forth an entire lineage's worth of memories. "I can't thank you enough," she managed to say, voice trembling. Archer placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I'm happy to see it back in your hands, and I appreciate the time we've shared. Fixing this watch wasn't about money or business. It was about trust and restoration, including what's in here." He lifted a hand to indicate her heart. In that quiet instant, their eyes met, and Cassandra could no longer ignore the warmth that had been growing between them. She lifted her free hand, placing it gently on the side of his face, feeling the rough texture of day-old stubble. With a breathless finality, she reached up and softly kissed him. The familiar smell of watch oil and faint cologne filled her senses. The kiss was tentative, an expression of the slow burn of emotions that had been building. When they pulled apart, it was as if a new kind of ticking began, one that marked the start of something neither of them fully understood, but wasn't afraid to explore. The days leading to Cassandra's thesis defense were a blurred mix of anxiety and anticipation. She approached her work with renewed vigor, feeling that the watch's gentle ticking on her bedside table reminded her of Archer's steady confidence in her. The final moment arrived in a grand lecture hall, where she presented her research, including a segment on the significance of family heirlooms in retaining generational stories. While she spoke, she wore the watch around her neck, a testament to the synergy between craft and heritage that she had come to cherish. When the panel congratulated her on her successful defense, she couldn't wait to share the news with Archer. She raced through the polished halls and out into the winter twilight, heart bursting with excitement. Snow had begun to drift softly, and she found herself smiling at the thought of telling him she had done it. She was now on the cusp of completing her master's journey. Upon arriving at Archer's Antiques, she found the door locked. Surprised, she peered through the window. A light glimmered in the back, but he wasn't in his usual spot. She tried knocking gently, and just as she was about to turn away, she heard footsteps behind the door. It swung open to reveal Archer, looking somewhat surprised but still shining that gentle, welcoming smile. "Cassandra, what a lovely surprise," he said, ushering her in from the cold. As she stepped inside, she noticed the store's main area was unusually tidy. No stray gears or small screwdrivers littered the countertops. Instead, there was a single candle in a brass holder atop the counter next to 2 cups of steaming tea. "I was hoping you'd come," he admitted, leading her to the warm glow on the counter. "I have a little something to celebrate." He reached under the counter and pulled out a small burgundy box, handing it to her. Inside, nestled in red velvet, lay a watch key and a matching chain designed to hold her family heirloom. The craftsmanship was impeccable, a perfect extension of the watch's antique design, with delicate engravings along the gold plating. Cassandra's eyes widened in disbelief. "This is absolutely beautiful. Archer, thank you." She felt tears pricking at her eyes, realizing the care he had invested to design and craft this special chain. "I came here to tell you I've passed my defense. I'm officially nearly done with my master's." He broke into a smile that seemed to light his entire face. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations. I knew you'd do great." He lifted one of the cups of tea and handed it to her. "Here's to new beginnings and old treasures. May we continue weaving them together." They clinked cups, sipping the aromatic tea. The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Their gazes carried the intimacy of shared triumph. Since they had first met months earlier with that broken watch in her trembling hands, both of them had grown in ways they hadn't expected. The hush of the shop felt different tonight, anticipatory, as if waiting for one more secret to be revealed. Archer set down his tea and extended a hand. "I want to show you something," he said. She let him lead her to the back room, where shelves of spare parts and antique clocks filled the. In the center stood a large, half-finished grandfather clock. A protective cloth covered most of it, but he pulled it aside to reveal the gleaming wood with elegant carvings. He ran a hand along the carvings, pride evident in his eyes. "This was my father's last project before he passed," Archer explained softly. "He left it incomplete, but I'm determined to finish it. I've been gathering the right tools and materials for years. It's a labor of love and memory." His voice caught slightly in his throat. "I was saving the unveiling for someone who'd appreciate the depth of it." She recognized that the real gift he was offering was trust. Trust in her, that she would understand the significance of this piece and the meaning behind it. Sliding her arm around his waist, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she murmured. "I'd be honored to help, if there's any small part you'll let me do." His hand settled over hers. "I'd love that," he replied, voice tinged with relief. "Sometimes having someone by your side makes all the difference." In the stillness of the back room, their breathing meshed in warm puffs against the chilly winter night. The unspoken harmony that had grown between them was now a palpable bond. They stood there for several moments, leaning on each other, letting the reality of shared dreams and new chapters wash over them. Whatever came next, it would be a story they would co-author. Over the next several weeks, the university quieted as students went home for the holidays. Cassandra stayed in the town longer than usual, partly to finalize requirements for her graduation, partly because she couldn't bear the thought of leaving Archer behind just yet. She and Archer spent long afternoons in the workshop, oiling gears and polishing wooden frames. One night, with a soft snowfall outside, they reunited in the store's cozy back room. The nearly finished grandfather clock stood as a testament to their teamwork. Archer carefully placed the newly crafted pendulum in its rightful place, letting it sway gently, while Cassandra tested the gears that powered the chimes. A sense of accomplishment fluttered in the air. Their routine of measured silence and thoughtful conversation had evolved into a deep camaraderie, accented by glances that held genuine affection. Sometimes they merely worked side by side without speaking. The quiet was unforced, a sign that both felt secure in each other's presence. Cassandra had begun to realize that the watch was only a small part of her bond with Archer. While it first brought them together, what kept them close was the steady recognition that each day held a new chance to understand and love another person wholly. As they attached the final finishing touches to the grandfather clock, applying a protective sealant to the wood and polishing its brass fixtures, Archer turned to her with a tender smile. I think we should give it a test run. Cassandra nodded, stepping aside as he wound the key carefully, listening to the tick as the pendulum started its rhythmic dance. Then, as if on cue, soft chimes bloomed in the stillness, echoing through the shop. Tears glistened in Archer's eyes. He placed a hand on the polished wooden casing, almost like an embrace between father and son across the divide of time. He exhaled shakily. It's complete. The last piece of my father's work. I never dreamed this clock could breathe life again. Cassandra reached for his hand. You did it, she affirmed gently, her own eyes brimming. Your father would be so proud. She stepped into him, letting her arms envelop him in a long embrace. With their faces close, she lifted herself on tiptoe and kissed him softly. Warmth spread through her, as comforting as a hearth fire during a storm. The clock chimed once more, and she laughed, tears mixing with joy. Is it silly that I feel like your father is giving us his blessing? Archer let out a quiet chuckle, resting his forehead against hers. Time has a way of bringing the past forward to guide us, he said softly. And I think your grandfather might be smiling too, watching you carry his watch close to your heart. Through that night, they sat in the back, sipping hot chocolate, listening to the newly awakened grandfather clock mark the slow passing of hours. The conversation meandered from future plans to the deep significance of preserving stories and memories for the generations that followed. Each tick echoed in the background like a promise that though time moved on, the moments they cherished would remain forever intertwined in their minds and hearts. Eventually, winter loosened its hold, and Cassandra's official graduation day arrived. She stood in cap and gown, watching a sea of fellow graduates gather in the university's grand auditorium. Cheers erupted, speeches were delivered, and diplomas were awarded. Cameras flashed, capturing 1,000 moments of triumph. All the while, the little watch, restored to its former glory, rested inside Cassandra's gown pocket, a gentle reminder of the journey that had led her here. After the ceremony, she slipped away from the crowd, stepping into the crisp outdoors to find Archer waiting near a fountain on campus. His face brightened when he spotted her, and he extended his arms. She ran into them, letting joyful laughter spill free, and they spun in a small circle as though they were the only two people in the world. When they pulled apart, he looked at her with a quiet awe. You did it, he murmured, smoothing a stray curl from her cheek. I'm so proud of you. Cassandra held his gaze. Only because you reminded me to believe in restoration, that anything broken can be fixed if we have the patience and the heart to do it. And you believed in me just as I was. She reached into her pocket and brought out the watch, which ticked softly in the sunlight. The engraved chain Archer had crafted still radiated its golden sheen. I thought maybe we could take a walk and find a nice place to let it catch some spring sun together. He offered his arm, a twinkle in his eye. I'd love nothing more. Consider it another chapter in a long and beautiful story. As they strolled along the campus paths, blossoms sprinkled from budding trees and the perfume of promise filled the air. They spoke of the future, of combining Archer's passion for antique restoration with Cassandra's affinity for preserving narratives. One of her ideas was to write a series of short stories based on the pieces he restored, weaving everyday romance and tangible objects that carried hidden histories. He listened, enthralled, offering suggestions, each agreement punctuated by a gentle squeeze of her arm. They reached a quiet garden near the library where stone benches sat amid blooming flowers. Settling side by side, Cassandra removed the watch from her gown pocket, letting the sun gleam off its surface. The ticking was steady, measured, almost comforting. Archer placed his hand on hers, placing their fingers together. It felt as if the world around them softly dissolved into that shared moment. You know, he said, voice contemplative, I used to fear modern times would make someone like me obsolete, but meeting you, I see that the old ways and new perspectives can coexist beautifully. She pressed a kiss to his knuckles, and I once thought family heirlooms were just relics of the past. Now I realize they carry so much more: love, memories, hope. Pulling him closer, she rested her head on his shoulder. I'm grateful that my watch ended up broken. If it hadn't, I might never have come to your shop and I wouldn't have found this. She lifted her joined hands, smiling at him. Archer cradled her cheek and gently kissed her forehead. Sometimes you have to unearth old pieces to discover new beginnings, and maybe that's the truest measure of time: the connections we forge, the moments we mend. The watch continued to tick steadily as a faint breeze stirred leaves around them. Sunlight bathed the pair in a soft radiance, highlighting the delicate craftsmanship both in the watch and in the bond they shared. In that serene, timeless space, they allowed themselves to simply be, breathing in the promise that they had found what they were looking for in each other. A kind of restoration that transcended any single era or broken gear. A hush of possibilities blanketed them, brimming with a love so quietly profound that neither felt compelled to name it just yet. And though the passing of minutes would continue, though new challenges and triumphs lay ahead, they both understood a gentle truth. Each resonant tick of the watch signaled their shared heartbeat, a melody that, once heard, could never be forgotten.